Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who walk on two legs, not four. High in the Colorado Rockies, where the wind carries secrets and the snow buries truth, Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her hand against her swollen belly and watched 5 massive wolves circle her cabin like mourners at a grave. For 8 months she'd hidden here from the world, from the memories that haunted her sleep, from the government contractors who'd made it clear her silence wasn't optional, it was survival. These wolves weren't behaving like any she'd studied in her 15 years as a wildlife veterinarian. They weren't hunting, they were begging. Their yellow eyes held something that made her breath catch, recognition, intelligence, and something that looked disturbingly like human desperation. When the largest wolf pressed its massive paw against her door and whined like a lost child, Elena felt her scientific mind warring with an impossible truth. What had the military done in these mountains, and why were these wolves looking at her like they remembered being something else entirely? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wind howled like the damned as Elena stepped back from the frosted window, her bare feet silent on the rough-hewn floorboards. The cabin's generator hummed its mechanical lullaby, the only sound that had kept her sane through the endless nights of isolation. Outside, the blizzard raged with biblical fury, what the weather reports had called the storm of the century before her satellite connection died 3 days ago. She'd chosen this place precisely because it was unreachable, a 40-mile hike from the nearest road even in good weather. The kind of place where a disgraced veterinarian could disappear with her unborn child and her terrible secrets. The kind of place where the ghosts of her past couldn't follow. But apparently the wolves could. Elena's hand found the Glock 19 she kept loaded on the kitchen counter, a weapon she'd never imagined needing until Dr. Marcus Reeves had smiled at her across that sterile laboratory table and explained, in his perfectly reasonable voice, why she could never speak about what she'd witnessed. The memory still made her stomach clench, the cages, the subjects, the moment she'd realized the screaming wasn't entirely animal. Through the window, she watched the pack maintain their vigil. The largest, a grey-black male, easily pushing 200 pounds, remained at her door, occasionally pawing at the reinforced wood with an almost human rhythm. Tap, tap, pause, like Morse code, like someone trying to communicate. Impossible. But Elena had built her career on the impossible. She'd been the veterinarian who'd proven wolves could recognize themselves in mirrors. The researcher who documented complex emotional responses in apex predators that textbooks insisted were purely instinctual. Her reputation for pushing boundaries had made her invaluable to certain government contracts, until she did push too far and discovered boundaries existed for reasons that had nothing to do with science. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if responding to her elevated heart rate. 8 months pregnant and hiding in a mountain cabin during a killer blizzard wasn't exactly the birthing plan she'd discussed with her doctor. But then, fleeing for her life hadn't been part of her original life plan either. Elena moved to her laptop, one of the few luxuries she'd allowed herself in exile. The files were still there, encrypted and buried beneath layers of security she'd learned from a paranoid hacker boyfriend in college. Video footage that could topple governments, research data that redefined the nature of consciousness itself, evidence of experiments that violated every law of ethics and nature. Project Lycanthropy. Even the name should have been a red flag. A new sound cut through the storm. Not the wild howling of wind, but something structured, purposeful. Elena's blood turned to ice water. It was howling, but in harmony. The 5 wolves were singing together, their voices weaving through each other in a pattern too complex for coincidence. She'd heard wolves sing before, but never like this. Never with the mathematical precision of a trained choir. The melody was hauntingly familiar, tugging at a memory she couldn't quite place, something classical, something human. Elena crept back to the window and peered through a gap in the curtains she'd made from emergency blankets. The pack had arranged themselves in a semicircle, muzzles raised to the storm-black sky, their song piercing through the wind like a prayer, like a funeral dirge. The baby kicked again, more insistently, and Elena pressed both hands to her belly. "I know, little one. This is all wrong." She'd spent 8 months preparing for the possibility that Reeves' people would find her, but she'd never imagined this. Whatever these creatures were, they weren't acting on government orders. Their desperation felt too real, too raw. The largest wolf broke from the group and approached her window directly. When it stood on its hind legs, it was tall enough to press its nose against the glass, leaving a star of condensation that fogged and cleared with each breath. Its yellow eyes met hers through the barrier, and Elena felt her world tilt. Those weren't wolf eyes. They held too much intelligence, too much pain, too much recognition. When the creature opened its mouth and released a sound that was half howl, half sob, Elena heard something that made her scientific training scream in protest. It sounded like it was trying to say her name. Thunder rolled across the mountains, or perhaps it was military aircraft. In the past 8 months, Elena had learned that the two were often indistinguishable. She checked her ammunition. 3 clips, enough to make a statement, but not enough to fight a war. The storm was supposed to last another 2 days, according to her last weather update. 2 days of being trapped with creatures that shouldn't exist, carrying secrets that could get her killed, pregnant with a child who would inherit a world where the line between human and animal had been deliberately blurred. Outside, the wolves continued their vigil, patient as death and twice as inevitable. Elena Vasquez, who had once believed in the clean boundaries of science, stared into yellow eyes that reflected a truth too dangerous to acknowledge and too impossible to deny. The predators had found her. But she was no longer certain which species they belonged to. Elena forced herself to step back from the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. The yellow eyes followed her movement, and she could swear she saw disappointment flicker across the wolf's features, an expression too nuanced, too human for any wild animal. "Get it together, Elena." She pressed her palms against her temples, trying to center herself the way Dr. Sarah Chen had taught her during those mandatory therapy sessions after the lab incident. "You're 8 months pregnant, isolated and traumatized. You're seeing things that aren't there." But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie. Her scientific training might be screaming in protest, but her instincts, honed by years of working with apex predators, were telling her something else entirely. These wolves weren't behaving like any pack she'd studied in her 12-year career. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in like a cage. Elena moved through her evening routine with mechanical precision, the same rituals that had kept her sane through 8 months of exile. Check the generator fuel, 3 days remaining. Inventory the emergency food supplies, canned goods and protein bars that would last another month if she was careful. Test the radio, still nothing but static, though whether from the storm or deliberate jamming she couldn't say. Her laptop sat open on the rough wooden table, the cursor blinking in the encrypted folder that contained her life's work. Before Project Lycanthropy, before everything went to hell, she'd been working on a comprehensive study of wolf cognition, 5 years of research into pack communication, social bonding, and emotional intelligence, work that had made her the perfect candidate for Reeves' classified project, work that had led her into a nightmare she was still trying to escape. Elena's fingers hovered over the keyboard, muscle memory pulling her toward the files she'd reviewed countless times. Video footage of her pre-exile life felt like looking at a stranger. Dr. Elena Vasquez, in her pristine lab coat, giving presentations to rooms full of government officials and military contractors. The woman who'd believed science could make the world better, who thought her research on animal consciousness was purely academic. The baby shifted inside her, a rolling movement that made her catch her breath. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the solid weight of the life growing there. This child would never know the father, a fellow researcher who'd died in what the official reports called a containment breach. Elena had learned later that James had tried to expose Project Lycanthropy to the media. His death hadn't been an accident. "Your daddy was a good man," she whispered to her unborn child, the words of familiar comfort. "He would have loved you so much." Outside, the wolves had gone quiet. The sudden absence of their haunting song made Elena's skin crawl. She moved to the window again, unable to resist checking on them. The pack remained in formation, but now they were all staring directly at her cabin, 5 sets of yellow eyes reflecting the dim light from her windows, unblinking and patient, like they're waiting for something. Elena's radio crackled to life, making her jump. Through the static came a weather update. The storm was intensifying, with wind speeds reaching dangerous levels. All rescue operations suspended indefinitely. She was well and truly cut off from the outside world. Not that she minded. The outside world held too many dangers, too many people who wanted her silenced permanently. Dr. Marcus Reeves and his government handlers had made their position clear. Elena's knowledge of Project Lycanthropy made her a national security threat. Her voluntary exile to this remote cabin was the only thing keeping her and her baby alive. She'd built a life here, of sorts. Simple routines that filled the endless hours of isolation. Morning exercises adapted for pregnancy. Afternoon reading sessions where she spoke aloud to her baby, sharing stories and scientific facts. Evening meditation by the fire, trying to process the trauma that still woke her in cold sweats. But it wasn't really living. It was surviving day by day until she could figure out how to bring her child safely into a world where their very existence was a liability. The wolves began to move, and Elena's attention snapped back to the present. They weren't leaving. Instead, they were repositioning themselves around the cabin's perimeter, taking up guard positions like soldiers securing a defensive line. The largest male remained at her front door, but the others spread out to cover all approaches. "They're protecting me." The thought hit her like a physical blow. These weren't predators stalking prey. They were guardians, and their desperation wasn't hunger. It was fear. Fear for her safety. Elena's hand found her weapon again, but for the first time since the pack arrived, she wasn't thinking about defending herself from them. She was thinking about what might be coming through the storm that had 5 apex predators this terrified. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her mother's rising panic. Elena closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. Whatever was happening, whatever impossible truth these wolves represented, she had more than just herself to protect now. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains again. But this time, Elena was certain it wasn't natural. The thunder grew louder, more rhythmic, and Elena's worst fears crystallized into certainty. Helicopters, military aircraft cutting through the storm with the kind of technology that didn't officially exist. The sound was still distant, but in the thin mountain air, sound carried farther than most people realized. "They found me." Elena's hands shook as she moved away from the window, her mind racing through possibilities. 8 months. She'd managed to stay hidden for 8 months, and now, in the middle of the worst blizzard in 50 years, they were coming. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Someone had been waiting, watching, planning for exactly this moment when she'd be most vulnerable. The largest wolf suddenly pressed itself against her door, not scratching or clawing, but pushing its full weight against the reinforced wood. The sound it made was unlike anything in her experience, a low, urgent whine that seemed to carry actual words. "Hurry, please, hurry." "This isn't happening," Elena whispered. But her scientific training was already cataloging the impossible. The wolf's vocalizations had tonal patterns consistent with human speech. Its body language suggested complex emotional states: fear, urgency, protective instinct. Everything she'd theorized about animal consciousness in her research, but amplified beyond any natural explanation. The helicopter sounds were getting closer. Elena grabbed her emergency bag, the one she'd kept packed since arriving at the cabin. Ammunition, medical supplies, the portable hard drive containing her encrypted files. She paused at her laptop, finger hovering over the delete key. 8 months of additional research, theories about what she'd witnessed in Reeves' laboratory, speculation about the true scope of Project Lycanthropy. The baby kicked hard, a sharp reminder that she wasn't just running for her own life anymore. Elena slammed the laptop shut and stuffed it into the bag. Whatever was happening, whatever choice she was about to make, her child deserved to know the truth someday. Outside, the wolf pack had gone into full alert mode. Their protective formation tightened, and Elena could see them scanning the storm-darkened sky. The largest male turned from her door to face the approaching aircraft, hackles raised, body coiled for a fight it couldn't possibly win. Unless it's not really a wolf. The thought hit her with the force of revelation. Elena pressed her face to the window, studying the creature's stance, its tactical awareness, the way it communicated with the rest of the pack through subtle movements. She'd seen similar behavior before in the classified footage from Project Lycanthropy, test subjects who retained human cognitive patterns despite their transformed physiology. The radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't a weather report. A voice cut through the static, cold, professional, horribly familiar. "Dr. Vasquez, this is Colonel Mitchell. We know you're monitoring emergency frequencies. The storm has created a dangerous situation, and we're here to extract you to safety. Please signal your location." Elena's blood turned to ice. She recognized the voice from her briefings at the facility. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, head of Project Lycanthropy's security division. The woman who'd overseen the containment protocols that had killed James and 3 other researchers who'd tried to expose the program. The wolves heard the transmission too. Their reaction was immediate and visceral. 5 sets of lips pulled back from gleaming fangs, low growls building to a coordinated snarl of pure hatred. The sound made Elena's hair stand on end, but it also confirmed her growing suspicion. They know that voice. They remember. The helicopter rotors were close enough now to rattle her windows. Elena could see searchlights cutting through the storm, methodical patterns that spoke of military precision. They weren't here for a rescue. They were here to tie up loose ends, and she was the biggest loose end of all. The largest wolf turned back to her door and began pawing frantically at the wood. Not random scratching, but deliberate strikes in a specific pattern. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, pause. Tap, tap, tap. SOS. Elena's scientific worldview cracked apart completely. She was looking at a wolf that knew Morse code, that recognized military voices, that was trying to warn her about incoming danger. A wolf that might not be a wolf at all. The creature caught her eye through the window and held her gaze. In those yellow depths, Elena saw something that made her decision inevitable. Intelligence, yes, but more than that. Recognition. This wasn't a random encounter. These wolves knew who she was, knew what she'd been through, knew why she was hiding. They're survivors too. The searchlights swept closer, and Elena realized she was out of time. She could stay in the cabin and face whatever Mitchell had planned for her and her unborn child. She could trust the official story about rescue and safety, despite everything she knew about how the government handled inconvenient witnesses. Or she could trust 5 impossible wolves who seemed to understand her situation better than any human ever had. Elena shouldered her emergency bag and moved toward the door. Her hand hesitated on the deadbolt as the full weight of her choice settled over her. Once she opened that door, there would be no going back to her carefully constructed isolation. She'd be stepping into a world where the boundaries between human and animal had been deliberately destroyed, where her unborn child would inherit secrets that could reshape humanity's understanding of consciousness itself. The largest wolf whined again, urgent and pleading. Behind it, searchlights painted the storm-torn landscape in harsh white relief. Elena turned the deadbolt and opened the door. The Arctic wind hit Elena like a physical blow, carrying ice crystals that stung her face and stole her breath. She stood frozen in the doorway, her hands still gripping the frame, as the full reality of what she was about to do crashed over her. This is insane. The largest wolf waited 3 feet away, snow swirling around its massive frame. Up close, it was even more imposing. easily 150 pounds of muscle and predatory grace. Its yellow eyes held hers with an intensity that made her want to step back into the cabin and slam the door. Every instinct screamed that she was about to make a fatal mistake. Elena Vasquez. The name escaped her lips in a whisper, and the wolf's ears twitched forward. 8 months ago, you were Dr. Elena Vasquez, respected researcher, published expert on animal cognition. Now look at you, about to follow a pack of wolves into a blizzard because you think they're trying to save you. The baby shifted inside her, a rolling movement that reminded Elena of her physical limitations. 8 months pregnant, carrying emergency supplies that would last maybe 2 days in this weather, following creatures that might be government experiments, enemy assets, or her own stress-induced hallucinations. The searchlights swept closer, and she could hear radio chatter over the helicopter's rotorwash. Multiple aircraft, coordinated search patterns. Mitchell wasn't taking any chances this time. Elena's grip tightened on her emergency bag. Inside was everything that mattered: her research, her evidence, the documentation that could expose Project Lycanthropy to the world. But what good would any of it do if she died in the wilderness? What good would justice do if her child never drew its first breath? James would tell you to run. The thought of her dead colleague steadied her somehow. He died trying to expose the truth. Are you going to let his sacrifice mean nothing? The wolf took a careful step forward, its massive paw silent in the snow. When it was close enough that Elena could see her own reflection in its eyes, it did something that shattered her last resistance to the impossible. It bowed. Not a play bow or a hunting posture, but a deliberate human gesture of respect and supplication. The creature lowered its great head until its muzzle nearly touched the ground, yellow eyes never leaving hers. "Dear God," Elena breathed. "You really are human, aren't you?" The wolf's response was a soft whine that sounded heartbreakingly like his. Elena looked back at her cabin one last time. 8 months of carefully constructed safety, of routine and isolation, and the illusion that she could hide from the truth forever. The fire still crackled in the hearth, casting warm light over the simple furniture she'd arranged to make this place feel like home. Books stacked on the rough wooden table, her meditation cushion by the window where she'd spent countless hours trying to process her trauma. It had never really been home, she realized. It had been a tomb. The helicopter rotors were deafening now, close enough that the downdraft was sending snow spiraling around the clearing. Elena could see the dark bulk of aircraft through the storm, searchlights probing the forest like hungry fingers. "Dr. Vasquez," Colonel Mitchell's voice crackled from the radio inside the cabin. "We have thermal signatures indicating your location. Please step outside with your hands visible. We're here to help." Elena almost laughed at the absurdity. Help, as if Mitchell's definition of help hadn't already cost James his life, hadn't driven Elena into exile, hadn't turned human beings into the creatures that now waited in her snow-covered yard. The largest wolf rose from its bough and turned toward the forest, taking a few steps before looking back at her expectantly. The rest of the pack had already begun moving, their dark forms disappearing into the tree line. They moved with purpose, following what Elena's trained eye recognized as an established trail. They know where they're going. But where? Deeper into the wilderness, away from any chance of human contact, to some government facility where she'd join the ranks of Project Lycanthropy's test subjects, or to something else entirely, something that might finally provide answers to the questions that had haunted her for 8 months. Elena's hand moved to her belly, feeling the solid weight of her unborn child. In 4 weeks, if everything went according to plan, she would be a mother. But what kind of world was she bringing this baby into? A world where consciousness could be transferred between species, where the government conducted illegal experiments on human subjects, where telling the truth was a death sentence. Maybe that was exactly why she needed to keep fighting. Maybe her child deserved to inherit a better world than the one Elena was leaving behind. The searchlights swept across her clearing, probing the edges of the forest. In moments, they would illuminate her cabin, and Mitchell's soldiers would rappel down to finish what they'd started 8 months ago. Elena took a deep breath of the frigid air and stepped into the storm. The moment Elena's boots hit the snow, the decision crystallized in her bones like ice. There was no hesitation left, no voice of reason pleading for her to reconsider. The searchlights carved through the blizzard behind her, but she was already moving toward the tree line, following the dark shape of the lead wolf. The snow was deeper than she'd expected, knee-deep drifts that made each step a struggle. Her pregnancy threw off her balance, and within 10 yards she was already breathing hard. The emergency bag felt like it weighed 100 pounds, but she couldn't abandon her research. Not when it might be the only thing standing between her child and a world where human consciousness was just another government commodity. The wolf pack moved like ghosts through the forest, somehow finding solid footing where Elena saw only treacherous shadows and hidden obstacles. The largest male stayed close enough that she could follow his dark form, but far enough ahead to scout for dangers she couldn't even imagine. Behind them, the helicopter rotors grew more urgent, and she heard the sharp crack of rappelling equipment. "They're fast," Elena realized with a spike of fear, "faster than I can move in this condition." As if sensing her thoughts, the lead wolf stopped and looked back. In the dim light filtering through the storm clouds, Elena saw something that made her stumble. The creature's expression wasn't just intelligent, it was concerned, worried about her pace, her safety, her ability to keep up with what was clearly a carefully planned escape route. The wolf trotted back to her side and did something that should have been impossible. It positioned itself parallel to her path and lowered its shoulder, offering physical support like a service animal. When Elena hesitated, the creature made that heartbreaking, almost human whine again. "Trust me." Elena placed her free hand on the wolf's broad back, feeling corded muscle and thick winter fur beneath her palm. The animal's body heat was like a furnace against her frozen fingers, and its steady gait helped her navigate the treacherous terrain. They moved faster now, the wolf's strength supplementing her own flagging energy. Behind them, voices echoed through the forest, Mitchell's soldiers spreading out in a search pattern. Elena caught fragments of radio chatter, thermal trail heading northwest, pregnant subject, consider dangerous, authorization for tranquilizer rounds only. Tranquilizer rounds. Elena's blood chilled further. They wanted her alive, which meant they had plans for her. Plans that probably involved ensuring her silence permanently while keeping her research intact. And what about the baby? What did Project Lycanthropy want with an unborn child whose mother knew too much? The wolf pack had been moving in single file, but now they spread out into a defensive formation. Elena realized they were following what looked like an old game trail, probably carved by decades of deer and elk movement. The trees provided some shelter from the worst of the wind, but snow still whipped through the branches with enough force to sting her exposed skin. "Where are we going?" Elena whispered to the wolf supporting her. She felt foolish talking to an animal, but everything about this situation had moved beyond normal parameters. "How far?" The creature turned its massive head toward her, and in its yellow eyes, Elena saw something that made her forget about the cold, the danger, the impossible nature of her situation. The wolf's gaze held a depth of understanding that spoke to recognition, not just of her words, but of her fear, her desperation, her need to protect the life growing inside her. "You know, don't you?" The thought hit her like revelation. "You know exactly what it's like to be hunted by Mitchell and her people. You know what it means to have your humanity stolen." The wolf's response was a soft huff that sounded remarkably like bitter laughter. They crested a ridge, and Elena could see the lights of her abandoned cabin through the trees behind them. 3 helicopters circled like mechanical vultures, their searchlights creating an aurora of harsh white against the storm. Tiny figures rappelled down on cables, soldiers equipped for Arctic warfare, trained for exactly this kind of extraction. Elena's hand moved to her belly as another contraction rippled through her abdomen. Not labor, she was still weeks away from that, but stress contractions that reminded her how precarious her situation had become. The baby seemed to sense the danger too, moving restlessly as if trying to find a safer position. "I'm sorry," she thought toward her unborn child. I'm sorry I'm bringing you into this nightmare, but maybe we can find a way to make it better." The lead wolf suddenly stopped, ears pricked forward. The entire pack froze, and Elena felt the animal beneath her hand tense like a loaded spring. Through the wind and snow, she could hear something that made her heart race. More helicopter rotors, but from a different direction. Mitchell had brought reinforcements, and they were trying to box in Elena's escape route. The wolf looked back at her one more time, and Elena saw a flash of something that might have been an apology. Then the creature broke into a ground-eating lope that forced Elena to abandon any pretense of normal human movement. She was running now, pregnant belly and all, deeper into the wilderness than she'd ever imagined going. There truly was no going back. The ground beneath Elena's feet dropped away without warning. She stumbled forward, her supporting wolf adjusting instantly to prevent her from falling down what she now realized was a steep ravine. The pack moved with the fluid precision of a military unit, each animal taking point or providing rear guard as they navigated terrain that would have been treacherous even in daylight. They've done this before. The thought crystallized as Elena watched the wolves coordinate their movements. This wasn't random flight. It was an established escape route, probably used multiple times. How many people have they helped? How many other witnesses has Mitchell been hunting? The helicopter rotors faded behind them, muffled by the ravine walls and the deepening forest. But Elena could still hear radio chatter echoing off the rocks, closer than she'd expected. Mitchell's soldiers were following on foot now, and they moved with the same deadly efficiency as the wolves. The lead wolf suddenly veered left, following what looked like a game trail carved into the ravine wall. Elena's legs burned as they climbed, her pregnancy making every step a deliberate effort. The wolf supporting her never wavered, its powerful frame compensating for her increasing exhaustion. Contact ahead. The voice froze Elena's blood. Human, male. Close enough that she could hear it clearly over the wind. The wolf pack responded instantly, melting into defensive positions among the rocks and trees. Elena found herself pressed against a boulder, the lead wolf's massive body shielding her from view. Through the swirling snow, she saw a figure emerge from the tree line 30 yards away. Military fatigues, Arctic gear, weapon held in ready position. One of Mitchell's soldiers, moving with the careful precision of someone who knew he was entering hostile territory. The soldier raised his radio. "Thermal trail goes cold here. Subjects may have taken shelter in—" His words cut off as the largest wolf materialized from the shadows behind him. Elena watched in horrified fascination as 150 pounds of predator moved with absolute silence across terrain that should have made stealth impossible. The soldier spun, weapon rising, but he was already too late. The wolf struck with surgical precision. Not to kill, Elena realized with shock, but to disable. The soldier went down hard, his weapon skittering away across the frozen ground. The wolf pinned him with one massive paw, while its jaws closed around the man's throat. But instead of tearing, the creature simply held him immobile. Jesus, it's giving him a choice. The soldier's eyes went wide with terror as he stared up into the wolf's yellow gaze. Elena could see his finger hovering over his radio's panic button, could almost hear his mental calculations about whether he could signal for help before those jaws closed permanently. Then the wolf did something that made Elena question everything she thought she knew about predator behavior. It released the soldier's throat and stepped back, head cocked in an almost human gesture of curiosity, waiting, watching, giving the man a chance to make the right choice. The soldier slowly moved his hand away from the radio. The wolf's tail twitched. Approval? Relief? Elena couldn't tell, but the creature seemed satisfied. It grabbed the man's weapon in its jaws and trotted away, leaving the soldier alive but disarmed. They're not killers. The realization hit Elena like physical force. Whatever was done to them, whatever Mitchell's people turned them into, they're still human enough to choose mercy. The pack reformed around her position, moving with even greater urgency now. The lead wolf nudged Elena forward, and she understood. One soldier meant others were close. Their window for escape was closing rapidly. They climbed higher, following switchbacks that Elena's scientific mind recognized as deliberately engineered. Someone had carved this trail, had created escape routes and defensive positions throughout this section of wilderness. The wolves weren't just running. They had infrastructure, organization, a plan that went far beyond simple survival. "Where are you taking me?" Elena gasped as they crested another ridge. The wolf supporting her slowed, allowing her to catch her breath. In the distance, she could see lights through the storm, not the harsh white of searchlights, but the warm yellow glow of windows. A structure, hidden deep enough in the wilderness that it wouldn't appear on any official maps. The lead wolf turned back to her, and in its eyes, Elena saw something that made her heart race with a mixture of hope and terror. Recognition, not just of her as an individual, but of what she represented. A scientist who understood Project Lycanthropy from the inside. Someone who might finally be able to help them reclaim what had been stolen. "They're not just saving me," Elena realized as the lights grew closer. "They think I can save them." Behind them, more voices echoed through the ravine. Mitchell's soldiers spreading out, tightening their search pattern. But ahead lay answers Elena had been seeking for 8 months. Answers about what her government had done to human consciousness and what it might mean for the child growing inside her. The pack moved toward the lights, and Elena followed, carrying her unborn baby deeper into a world where the boundaries of humanity had been redrawn by force. The structure ahead materialized through the storm like something from a fever dream. Not the crude cabin Elena had expected, but a sophisticated compound built into the mountainside itself. Solar panels gleamed beneath layers of snow, and she could see the subtle glow of electronics through reinforced windows. This wasn't a refuge, it was a base of operations. Elena's wolf companions slowed as they approached, allowing her to process what she was seeing. Multiple buildings connected by covered walkways, all designed to blend seamlessly with the natural rock formations. Whoever had built this place had resources far beyond what any group of escaped test subjects should possess. Unless they're not just test subjects. The lead wolf stopped at what appeared to be solid rock face and released a low, modulated howl. Elena recognized the pattern. 3 short bursts followed by 2 long ones. A code. The rock face split along hidden seams, revealing reinforced doors that whispered open on silent mechanisms. Warm air rushed out to greet them, carrying scents that made Elena's scientific mind race. Electronics, medical supplies, coffee. And underneath it all, the unmistakable smell of humans. "Dr. Vasquez." The voice came from the shadows beyond the doorway, female, calm, tinged with an accent Elena couldn't place. "We've been waiting for you." A figure stepped into the light, and Elena's breath caught. The woman was perhaps 40, with steel-grey hair and eyes that held the same impossible depth Elena had seen in the wolves. But she was undeniably human, dressed in practical winter clothing that couldn't disguise the lean muscle of someone accustomed to survival. "Who are you?" Elena managed, her hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. The wolves had led her to safety, but safety from Mitchell didn't necessarily mean safety from whatever this place represented. "Dr. Sarah Chen, former neuroscientist for Project Lycanthropy." The woman's smile was bitter. "Like you, I discovered that asking questions about consciousness transfer was considered a career-limiting move. Unlike you, I didn't run far enough, fast enough." Elena's mind reeled. Another scientist, another survivor. "You're human. You weren't subjected to the transfer protocol?" "No, I was useful enough in my original form." Chen stepped aside, gesturing for Elena to enter. "But I've seen what happens to those who aren't. What your government considers an acceptable cost for advancing the science." The wolves followed them through the doorway, and Elena heard the massive doors seal behind them with a sound like a bank vault closing. The corridor beyond was carved from living rock, but lined with modern equipment. Communications gear, environmental controls, security monitors showing multiple views of the surrounding forest. On one screen, Elena could see Mitchell's soldiers spreading through the ravine they'd just escaped. Thermal imaging revealed the soldiers' heat signatures as they methodically searched every possible hiding place. But the screens also showed something else, more wolves, moving in coordinated patterns around the soldiers' positions. Not attacking, but herding, guiding the search away from the hidden compound. "How many?" Elena whispered. 43 confirmed transfers, Chen replied, following Elena's gaze to the monitors. Men and women who volunteered for what they thought was consciousness research, only to discover they were test subjects for military applications. Your colleague, Dr. Martinez, documented the early protocols before they killed him. James. Elena felt the familiar spike of grief and rage. "You knew him?" "We all knew him. He was trying to reach us when Mitchell's people caught up with him." Chen's expression hardened. "His research was the foundation for everything we've built here. The proof that consciousness transfer isn't just possible, it's reversible." The word hit Elena like electricity. Reversible? With the right equipment and expertise. Which is why we've been waiting for you. Chen led them deeper into the compound, past rooms filled with sophisticated medical equipment and computer banks. "Your work on neural mapping before you went into hiding, it's the missing piece we need." Elena's mind raced through the implications. If the transfer process could be reversed, if these people could reclaim their human bodies, but the technical challenges alone would be staggering. The neural degradation after transfer would be massive. Even if you could map the original consciousness patterns, rebuilding the synaptic pathways would require someone with your specific expertise, Chen finished. Someone who understood both the theoretical framework and the practical applications. Someone Mitchell's people haven't corrupted or killed. They emerged into a large central chamber that took Elena's breath away. The space was part laboratory, part war room, part sanctuary. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens displaying complex neural mapping algorithms that Elena recognized from her own abandoned research. Medical equipment sophisticated enough to rival any university hospital, and throughout the room, wolves moved alongside humans with the easy familiarity of colleagues. Not wolves, Elena corrected herself as she watched the interactions more closely. People trapped in wolf bodies, working with the humans who escaped the same fate. "The question," Chen continued, "is whether you're willing to help us. The procedure we're proposing would be experimental, dangerous, and it would put your child at risk." Elena felt her baby move restlessly, as if responding to her elevated heart rate. Outside, Mitchell's forces were closing in, following a trail that would eventually lead them here. These people, human and wolf alike, were offering her the chance to strike back against the system that had destroyed so many lives, but they were also asking her to risk everything she had left. Elena stared at the banks of computers, their screens casting ethereal blue light across the faces of humans and wolves alike. The weight of Chen's words settled in her chest like lead. Everything she had left. Her hand moved protectively to her belly, feeling the subtle flutter of her child's movement. "Show me," she said quietly. Chen led her to a central workstation where neural mapping data scrolled in real time. Elena recognized the patterns immediately. Consciousness fragmentation indices, synaptic decay rates, memory preservation algorithms. Her own theoretical work made manifest in ways she'd never imagined possible. "This is Dr. Marcus Webb," Chen said, gesturing to a massive grey wolf lying beside the computer bank. Former Marine Sergeant, volunteered for what he thought was enhanced cognition research. The transfer was completed 18 months ago. Elena knelt slowly, her pregnancy making the movement awkward. The wolf, Webb, lifted his head, and she found herself staring into eyes that held 19 years of military service, a wife named Sarah, 2 daughters who thought their father died in a training accident. "How do I know that?" The thought came unbidden, followed by a chill of recognition. The neural resonance patterns displayed on the screens weren't just data, they were broadcasting. Her enhanced sensitivity, the same trait that had made her vulnerable to the consciousness research, was picking up fragments of Webb's trapped memories. "You can sense them," Chen observed. "We thought you might. It's why Mitchell wanted you alive. Your natural sensitivity to consciousness patterns is off any known scale. Elena's baby kicked sharply, as if responding to her elevated stress. The movement sent a contraction rippling through her abdomen, strong enough to make her gasp. Not labor, still weeks too early, but her body's warning that it was reaching its limits. Chen was beside her instantly, medical scanner in hand. When did the stress contractions start? Hours ago. They're getting stronger. Elena accepted Chen's help standing, but her eyes never left the screens. The consciousness patterns were mesmerizing, beautiful in their complexity, and familiar in ways that terrified her. Chen, these algorithms, they're based on my work. How did you... Your colleague Martinez wasn't the only one who tried to reach us. You sent encrypted data packets to 6 different secure servers before you disappeared. Chen's expression was grim. We've been using your theoretical framework to develop the reversal protocols, but theory and practice are 2 different things, Elena finished. The screens showed her life's work perverted into something unrecognizable, then twisted back toward redemption. The neural degradation patterns, they're accelerating. Webb's original consciousness is fragmenting faster than your preservation algorithms can compensate. Webb whined softly, a sound that held more human anguish than any wolf should be capable of expressing. Elena felt the fragments of his memories pressing against her awareness. Christmas mornings with his daughters, the weight of his uniform, the trust in his eyes when he'd volunteered for the program. How long does he have? She whispered. 6 weeks, maybe less. Chen pulled up additional data streams. They all have the same deterioration pattern. Without successful reversal, their original consciousness will collapse completely. They'll become wolves in truth, all human memory, personality, everything that made them who they were, gone forever. Elena's breath caught. 43 people facing a countdown to effective death, their bodies already stolen, their minds now slipping away piece by piece. And these people wanted her to perform experimental procedures while she was weeks away from giving birth, with Mitchell's forces closing in from all sides. The equipment requirements alone would be staggering, Elena said, thinking aloud. Quantum-level consciousness mapping, surgical neural interface systems, life support for both the wolf and human forms during transfer. She trailed off as she realized what she was looking at. The medical equipment surrounding them wasn't just sophisticated, it was cutting-edge consciousness research technology, military-grade systems that shouldn't exist outside classified facilities. You stole Mitchell's own equipment, she breathed. Chen's smile was sharp as winter wind, not stole, liberated, along with several key personnel who decided they preferred their original species. She gestured to the humans working alongside the wolves. Former technicians, medical staff, even a few soldiers who discovered what they were really guarding. Another contraction gripped Elena, stronger than before. She doubled over, one hand braced against the workstation, the other pressed to her belly. The baby was moving frantically now, as if sensing the impossible choice facing them both. Help these people and risk everything. Walk away and live with the knowledge that 43 human souls will die slowly, trapped in bodies that were never meant to hold them. I need to see the full protocol, Elena said when the contraction passed. Every variable, every risk factor, and I need to know exactly how much time we have before Mitchell finds this place. Chen's expression held relief and terror in equal measure. The thermal masking will hold for perhaps 6 hours. After that, Elena nodded grimly. 6 hours to review procedures that should take weeks to understand. 6 hours to decide whether to attempt something that could save 43 people or kill them all, including her unborn child. Everything she had learned was about to be tested. Elena's hands flew over the quantum neural interface controls, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed Webb's consciousness patterns in real time. The reversal protocol was working. She could see his human memories reassembling, synaptic pathways rebuilding themselves with surgical precision. For the first time in weeks, hope blazed in her chest. Neural coherence at 67% and climbing, Chen reported from the monitoring station. Memory integration stable. Elena, this is actually... Alarms shrieked through the compound. Red emergency lighting bathed the laboratory as proximity sensors screamed warnings that made Elena's blood turn to ice. The thermal masking had failed 3 hours early. Contact. Multiple aircraft inbound. The voice belonged to Sarah Kim, one of the escape technicians monitoring external communications. Mitchell's bringing everything. Helicopters, ground troops, even military contractors. Elena's fingers never stopped moving, even as her world collapsed around her. Webb was so close to complete restoration. His consciousness pattern showed only minutes remaining before the transfer would be irreversible. But those minutes might as well be hours. "We have to evacuate," Chen said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Elena, we need to abort the procedure." "No." Elena's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "I can finish this. Webb's almost back." Another contraction hit her, this one different from the stress episodes. Deeper, more urgent. Her water broke with a rush that soaked through her clothing and pooled on the laboratory floor. The baby was coming, weeks early, as if her body had decided this moment of maximum danger was the perfect time for labor. "Elena," Chen abandoned her station, medical training overriding everything else. "You're in active labor. We have to get you to medical..." Explosions echoed from the upper levels. The lights flickered as emergency power kicked in, and Elena could hear the distinctive whine of military assault weapons. Mitchell's forces weren't bothering with subtlety. They were coming in hard and fast, intent on destroying everything they found. Webb's wolf form thrashed on the neural interface table, caught between species as the interrupted procedure left his consciousness suspended in limbo. His eyes, still wolf yellow but somehow achingly human, fixed on Elena with desperate trust. "Finish it," those eyes seemed to say. "Please." Elena looked at the screens showing Webb's neural patterns degrading in real time, then at the tactical displays where red dots representing Mitchell's forces poured through the compound's outer defenses. Chen was shouting something about emergency escape protocols, while another contraction tore through Elena's abdomen with vicious intensity. She made her choice. Her hands returned to the controls, inputting final sequence commands, even as bullets sparked off the laboratory's reinforced walls. Webb's consciousness patterns stabilized, then began the final phase of transfer, but the procedure required 12 more minutes of uninterrupted power, and the emergency generators were already straining under combat damage. "Elena, what are you doing?" Chen grabbed her arm. "We have to go now." "He's so close," Elena gasped as another contraction hit. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not, and Mitchell's forces were less than 2 minutes from breaching the laboratory. But Webb's human memories were reassembling like pieces of a shattered photograph, each fragment clicking into place with mathematical precision. The power failed. Webb's body convulsed once on the table, then went terrifyingly still. The quantum neural interfaces shut down with soft electronic sighs, leaving the laboratory in emergency lighting that painted everything the color of dried blood. Elena stared at the dark screens, her life's work reduced to nothing by a generator that couldn't survive military-grade explosives. "Is he?" Elena couldn't finish the question. Webb's chest rose and fell, but she had no way of knowing who was breathing. The Marine sergeant she'd been trying to save, or the wolf he'd been trapped as, or something worse, a mind broken between species. "I don't know," Chen whispered. "The neural pattern transfer was at 94% completion when we lost power. He could be fully restored, partially transferred, or completely fragmented," Elena finished. Instead of saving Webb, she might have condemned him to existence as a consciousness so shattered it could never be repaired. The weight of that possibility felt heavier than her pregnancy, heavier than the certainty that Mitchell's soldiers would be through the laboratory doors within minutes. Chen was pulling her toward an emergency exit hidden behind false rock, but Elena resisted. Webb's unconscious form lay vulnerable on the table, and 42 other wolves throughout the compound faced the same fate he did. Capture, experimentation, eventual death as Mitchell's people sought to perfect their obscene science. She had come so close to proving the reversals were possible, close enough to taste victory. But close wasn't enough when consciousness was measured in quantum patterns, and failure meant the permanent destruction of everything that made a person human. The laboratory doors exploded inward as Mitchell's forces breached the final barrier, and Elena allowed Chen to drag her into darkness, leaving her hopes dying on a table behind them. The emergency tunnel stretched endlessly into mountain darkness, carved from living granite centuries ago by miners who never imagined their excavations would become an escape route for victims of consciousness theft. Elena stumbled through the narrow passage, Chen's firm grip on her arm the only thing keeping her upright as contractions tore through her body with increasing frequency. Behind them, the sounds of Mitchell's assault grew fainter but never disappeared entirely. Shouting voices, equipment being destroyed, the distinctive crack of assault rifles. Each echo made Elena think of the wolves trapped in the compound, the people she'd failed to save. "Elena, we need to stop." Chen's voice was breathless but professional. "Your labor is progressing too fast. If you don't rest, they'll find us." Elena forced herself forward another few steps before the next contraction doubled her over completely. This time the pain brought clarity instead of confusion. Her water had broken 20 minutes ago. The contractions were less than 3 minutes apart. Her baby was coming whether Mitchell's forces were hunting them or not. Chen was already setting up emergency medical supplies by the light of a battery-powered lantern. "There's a wider chamber 50 meters ahead. We can—" "Chen." Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Webb moved. "What?" When the power failed, just before everything went dark, I saw him turn his head. Elena sank against the tunnel wall as another contraction peaked. The neural interface was at 94% completion. If the quantum patterns had enough coherence to maintain basic motor function during the shutdown, Chen's eyes widened as she understood the implication. The transfer might have completed naturally. Consciousness has its own momentum at that level of integration. "Elena, if you're right, Webb could be fully restored." But Elena was no longer thinking about Webb. The realization struck her with the force of revelation, reshaping everything she thought she understood about the situation they faced. "Chen, how long have you been monitoring my neural patterns?" "Since you arrived. Standard procedure for anyone entering the compound." Chen frowned at the apparent non sequitur while checking Elena's dilation. "Why do you— Elena, you're at 8 centimeters. This baby is coming in the next hour whether we're safe or not." Elena gripped Chen's wrist with desperate strength. "Show me the readings, my neural patterns. I need to see them." Chen hesitated, then activated a portable scanner. The display showed Elena's consciousness patterns as swirling galaxies of light, beautiful and complex beyond measure. But it also showed something else. Subtle harmonic frequencies that pulsed in rhythm with her unborn child's heartbeat. "My God," Elena breathed. "The baby's patterns are synchronizing with mine. It's normal for late-stage pregnancy. Neural development in utero often shows resonance with the mother's." "No." Elena's voice cut through Chen's explanation like a scalpel. "Look at the frequency modulation. That's not normal fetal development. That's consciousness transfer preparation." The portable scanner trembled in Chen's hands as the implications sank in. "Elena, what are you saying?" "My enhanced sensitivity to consciousness patterns, Mitchell's specific interest in keeping me alive, the timing of everything." Elena felt the pieces clicking together with terrible clarity. They didn't just want me for my expertise, they wanted my baby. Another contraction hit, but Elena barely felt it as the full scope of the horror became clear. A consciousness transfer requires a receptive neural substrate. Adult brains are too developed, too rigid, but an infant's developing neural pathways would be perfect for consciousness implantation. Chen finished, her face pale in the lantern light. "Elena, you're suggesting they plan to use your child as a test subject for their experiments. Not just any consciousness." Elena's voice was steady despite the chaos in her mind. "Mitchell mentioned enhanced operators, Military personnel with the psychological conditioning to accept consciousness transfer. They weren't just stealing people's bodies, they were creating a breeding program for the perfect subjects. The baby kicked frantically, as if sensing Elena's distress. But now Elena understood the movement differently. Not just fetal activity, but the response of a developing mind already touched by the quantum resonance fields that had surrounded her for months. Chen, what if exposure to the consciousness transfer technology doesn't just affect the primary subject? What if it modifies any developing neural tissue in the vicinity? Chen's scanner was showing increasingly complex patterns from Elena's abdomen. The baby's developing consciousness wasn't just synchronizing with Elena's, it was amplifying her natural sensitivity to an unprecedented degree. "If you're right," Chen said slowly, "your child would be born with consciousness manipulation, abilities that dwarf anything we've seen. They could potentially interface with the neural transfer technology directly without mechanical intermediation." Elena felt the final contraction building, her body preparing for birth whether her mind was ready or not. But the revelation had shifted everything. This wasn't just about escaping Mitchell or saving the trapped wolves. Her child represented the next evolution of consciousness research, either the key to freeing everyone trapped in the program or the ultimate weapon in Mitchell's hands. The tunnel echoed with distant sounds of pursuit. Mitchell's forces had found the emergency exit. Elena forced herself to breathe through the agony of transition labor, her medical training warring with maternal instinct as Chen's words echoed in the tunnel darkness. Mitchell's forces were closing in, but the baby was coming now, crowning, demanding to be born into this underground hell whether it was safe or not. "Elena, I need you to push," Chen commanded, her voice switching to the clinical authority of emergency medicine. "The baby's head is—" Her words cut off as her scanner erupted in cascading alerts. The device wasn't just detecting Elena's consciousness patterns anymore. Something else was emerging from the tunnel depths behind them, multiple neural signatures approaching with impossible coordination. Elena's enhanced sensitivity suddenly blazed like a beacon, and she could feel them, Webb and 3 other wolves, moving through the darkness with purpose that transcended animal instinct. "They found us," Elena gasped between contractions. But even as terror spiked through her exhaustion, she realized the approaching consciousness patterns felt wrong for Mitchell's soldiers. Too complex, too layered with human memory fragments. Webb emerged into the lantern light first, his massive form filling the tunnel entrance. But his yellow eyes held unmistakable intelligence, not wolf cunning, but human awareness wrapped in lupine flesh. Behind him came Marcus Chen's sister Lisa, the former intelligence analyst, and 2 other wolves Elena recognized from the compound. "The neural transfer," Elena breathed. It completed. Webb approached slowly, his massive head lowering until he could look directly into Elena's eyes. When he opened his mouth, what emerged wasn't a howl but carefully modulated sounds, an attempt at human speech filtered through vocal cords that couldn't quite form the words. "We came back for you." Chen nearly dropped her medical equipment. "That's impossible. Wolves can't—" "They're not wolves anymore," Elena interrupted, understanding flooding through her as another contraction demanded her attention. "They're fully restored humans in lupine bodies, but with retained consciousness transfer abilities." Webb's pack moved with military precision, taking defensive positions as the sounds of pursuit grew closer. But Elena could sense something else through her enhanced awareness. The wolves were sharing information instantaneously, their consciousness patterns overlapping and synchronizing in ways that suggested collective intelligence. "Elena, you have to push now," Chen urged. "The baby can't wait for—" Gunfire erupted from deeper in the tunnel as Mitchell's forces encountered Webb's rearguard. But the wolves fought with human tactical knowledge combined with supernatural coordination, each member of the pack instantly aware of what the others sensed. Through the chaos of labor and combat, Elena felt her enhanced consciousness abilities spike to unprecedented levels. The baby's emerging neural patterns were amplifying her natural sensitivity, creating a feedback loop that allowed her to perceive the quantum mechanics of consciousness transfer with crystalline clarity. "Chen," she gasped between pushes, "the wolves aren't just restored, they're networked." Webb turned his massive head toward her, and Elena felt his thoughts pressing against her awareness with startling clarity. The transfer process created permanent quantum entanglement between our consciousness patterns. We can share thoughts, memories, sensory input. Elena's eyes widened as the implications struck her. You're not just individuals anymore. You're a collective intelligence with 43 perspectives. The baby crowned with a rush that sent Elena's consciousness abilities into overdrive. For one impossible moment, she could perceive every neural pattern within a mile radius: Mitchell's soldiers advancing through the tunnels, the other wolves throughout the mountain complex, and something else, something vast and coordinated that stretched far beyond this single compound. "There are others," Elena breathed, as her child slipped into Chen's waiting hands. "Other facilities, hundreds of transferred consciousness across multiple sites." The baby's first cry echoed through the tunnel with unusual harmonics, and Elena felt the quantum resonance fields around them shift and stabilize. Her daughter, she could sense it was a daughter now, was born with neural pathways already adapted to consciousness manipulation technology. Webb's thoughts pressed against Elena's awareness again. "We cannot fight them alone. But your child, she can interface with the transfer networks directly. She could free everyone." Elena cradled her newborn daughter, feeling the infant's incredible neural potential like static electricity against her skin. The baby's consciousness patterns were already reaching out, instinctively connecting with the quantum entanglement fields that linked the restored wolves. "We're not running anymore," Elena said, her voice steady despite the gunfire echoing from the tunnel approaches. "Mitchell wants to use consciousness transfer as a weapon, but we can use it as liberation." Chen finished clearing the baby's airways, her expression shifting from medical focus to tactical assessment. "What are you proposing?" Elena looked at Webb, then at her daughter, then at the scanner still showing impossible consciousness readings. "We're going to network every transferred consciousness across every facility, create a collective intelligence so powerful that Mitchell's individual operators can't contain it." Webb's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile if wolves could smile. Through their quantum connection, Elena felt the agreement ripple through the entire pack, and beyond them, to restored consciousness across the globe. The hunt was about to become a liberation. The tunnel shuddered as explosions echoed from the compound above, dust raining down like gritty snow on Elena's newborn daughter. But Elena barely noticed the debris. Her consciousness was expanding beyond anything she'd experienced before, the baby's neural patterns creating quantum bridges that connected her awareness to hundreds of transferred minds across the globe. "Chen, I can see them all," Elena whispered, her voice tight with wonder and horror. "Milwaukee, Vancouver, 3 facilities in Eastern Europe. They've been running parallel programs for years." Her daughter's tiny fist closed around Elena's finger, and the contact sent another surge of awareness through the growing network. The baby wasn't just interfacing with the consciousness transfer technology, she was rewriting it, her developing neural pathways instinctively optimizing the quantum entanglement protocols that linked transferred minds. Webb's pack pressed closer as Mitchell's forces advanced through the tunnels, their collective intelligence sharing tactical information faster than any human command structure could process. But Elena could sense something else through their connection: fear, not for themselves, but for what they'd become. "Show me," Elena projected through the neural link. The memories hit her like a physical blow. Webb's perspective, as his human consciousness was ripped from his body and forced into lupine flesh. The agony of Lisa Chen, as her intelligence analyst training was preserved while her humanity was stripped away piece by piece. 43 individual hells, each person trapped in animal form while retaining perfect memory of what they'd lost. "My God," Elena breathed. You've all been conscious this entire time, aware of what was happening but unable to communicate it. Webb's yellow eyes held depths of suffering that no animal should possess. Months of being treated like test subjects while our human minds screamed inside wolf bodies. Mitchell's people knew we were aware. They found our psychological responses more interesting that way. Elena's enhanced sensitivity suddenly flared as new neural signatures approached from the tunnel's far entrance. But these weren't Mitchell's soldiers. The consciousness patterns felt familiar, touched by the same quantum resonance that linked Webb's pack. More wolves, Chen observed, checking her scanner readings. But something's different about their neural patterns. Elena understood immediately. They're newly transferred, still fighting the integration. 3 wolves emerged from the darkness, their movements jerky and uncoordinated as human consciousness battled lupine instinct. Through the network connection, Elena felt their desperation. Recent captures from the upper compound transferred in haste as Mitchell's operation began its final phase. Webb moved toward the newcomers with careful precision, his thoughts projecting comfort and understanding through the quantum link. But Elena sensed something else in the network traffic: resistance. The newly transferred minds were fragmenting under the stress of forced species transition. "We're losing them," Elena said, shifting her daughter to Chen's arms as she struggled to stand. "The transfer process is degrading without proper integration protocols." One of the new wolves collapsed, its body convulsing as competing consciousness patterns fought for control. Elena reached out with her enhanced abilities, trying to stabilize the failing neural patterns, but the damage was too extensive. She was watching a human mind die in real time, torn apart by Mitchell's rushed procedures. "This is why we need your daughter," Webb's thoughts pressed against her awareness. Her natural integration abilities could stabilize failing transfers across the entire network. She could save minds that are fragmenting beyond repair. Elena looked at her newborn child, barely an hour old and already possessing consciousness manipulation abilities that surpassed decades of research. The baby's neural patterns were automatically reaching out to the dying wolf, trying to provide stability through pure instinct. "No," Elena said firmly, "I won't let you turn my daughter into a weapon, even for liberation. Then thousands will die as their consciousness patterns degrade beyond recovery," Webb projected back. "Mitchell has accelerated the transfer timeline. Facilities worldwide are processing subjects faster than safe integration protocols allow. Without intervention, every transferred consciousness will fragment within days." The sound of approaching combat grew louder as Mitchell's forces closed in from both directions. Chen was preparing defensive positions with medical supplies, but Elena could sense through the network that they were outnumbered 50-1. The tactical situation was hopeless unless they could expand the wolf pack's collective intelligence faster than Mitchell could bring conventional firepower to bear. Elena felt the weight of impossible choices crushing down on her. Use her infant daughter's abilities to save thousands of trapped minds, or protect her child from becoming the next generation of consciousness transfer experimentation. Fight Mitchell's forces directly and lose, or tap into power that could free everyone at the cost of her daughter's normal development. Through the quantum network, she sensed Webb and his pack preparing for what they all knew would be their final stand. 43 enhanced minds coordinating defensive strategies while newly transferred wolves died around them from integration failure. Elena made her decision. "Chen, give me the portable neural interface," she commanded. "I'm not letting my daughter carry this burden alone." She was going to link her own consciousness directly into the transfer network, combining her enhanced sensitivity with her daughter's natural abilities. If it killed her, at least her child would have a chance at a normal life. The final confrontation was about to begin. Chen's hands shook as she passed Elena the portable neural interface, its quantum processors still warm from scanning the baby's unprecedented consciousness patterns. "Elena, direct interface with an active transfer network could fragment your own neural pathways. You could lose yourself completely in the collective." Better than losing my daughter to Mitchell's experiments. Elena cradled the device against her temple, feeling the cold metal contacts align with her enhanced neural sensitivity points. Around them, gunfire echoed closer as Webb's pack coordinated their defensive positions through quantum-linked thoughts that moved faster than spoken commands. The interface activated with a surge that sent lightning through Elena's consciousness. Suddenly, she wasn't just perceiving the Wolfpack's networked intelligence, she was part of it. 43 perspectives flooded her awareness simultaneously, Webb's tactical analysis overlaying Lisa Chen's intelligence assessment, while dozens of other human minds trapped in lupine bodies shared sensory data in perfect synchronization. But Elena brought something the others lacked. Her months of enhanced sensitivity had prepared her neural pathways for consciousness manipulation on a scale none of Mitchell's subjects had experienced. Where they fought to maintain individual identity within the collective, Elena embraced the network's full potential. Testing direct interface protocols, she projected across the quantum link, her thoughts instantly accessible to every networked mind. Chen, monitor my daughter's neural patterns. If they spike beyond safe parameters, disconnect me immediately. Through the network, Elena felt Mitchell's forces advancing from 3 tunnel approaches, their individual consciousness patterns blazing like torches against her expanded awareness. But she could sense something else now, fear radiating from the soldiers as they realized they were facing an enemy that shared thoughts faster than radio communication. Elena, Webb's thoughts pressed against her awareness. We're detecting massive neural pattern fluctuations from facilities worldwide. Mitchell has activated emergency protocols. They're attempting to transfer entire populations before we can establish network stability. The scope of horror crashed over Elena like a physical blow. Through quantum entanglement bridges her daughter was unconsciously creating, she perceived transfer facilities processing subjects by the hundreds. Military bases where captured civilians were being stripped of their bodies. Research centers where children barely older than toddlers were undergoing consciousness extraction. Elena's enhanced abilities, amplified by network connection and her daughter's natural quantum manipulation, suddenly expanded beyond anything she'd imagined possible. She could perceive the fundamental architecture of consciousness itself, the quantum mechanical foundation that allowed thoughts to exist independent of biological substrate. "Chen," Elena gasped, her voice strained as information flooded her awareness. Mitchell isn't just transferring individual consciousness. He's attempting to create a slave species. Thousands of human minds trapped in animal bodies, completely dependent on his research facilities for survival. Her daughter began crying, the infant's distress sending ripples through the quantum network that every linked consciousness felt simultaneously. But Elena realized the baby wasn't responding to external stimuli. She was reacting to the collective anguish of thousands of trapped minds crying out across the global network. She can hear them all, Elena realized. Every transferred consciousness worldwide. The quantum bridges are strengthening exponentially. Webb's pack engaged Mitchell's advance forces with supernatural coordination, each wolf responding to threats their packmates, perceived before individual senses could register danger. But Elena felt their tactical situation deteriorating rapidly. More soldiers were pouring into the tunnel system than their small force could handle, no matter how perfect their coordination. Through the network, Elena sensed other wolf packs at facilities worldwide receiving the same quantum-enhanced intelligence. In Milwaukee, 17 transferred minds were coordinating an escape attempt. In Vancouver, 32 wolves had broken free from their containment and were systematically destroying transfer equipment. But the victories came with terrible costs. Elena felt consciousness patterns fragmenting across the network as newly transferred subjects couldn't handle the rapid integration Mitchell's emergency protocols demanded. Human minds were dying by the dozens, their awareness dissolving into static as overloaded neural pathways collapsed. Elena, Webb's thoughts carried desperate urgency. Your daughter's abilities are the only thing that can stabilize failing consciousness patterns. But using her power on this scale would turn her into exactly what Mitchell wants, Elena finished aloud. A consciousness manipulation weapon powerful enough to control transferred minds globally. Chen checked her scanner readings, her face pale in the tunnel's flickering light. Elena, your neural patterns are approaching critical stress levels. Much more network integration, and your individual consciousness could fragment permanently. Elena felt the truth of Chen's warning in her bones. The quantum network was vast beyond human comprehension, thousands of minds linked across continents in ways that challenged the fundamental concept of individual identity. She could feel her sense of self beginning to blur at the edges, dissolving into the collective awareness like salt in an ocean. But she also felt something else through the network connection, hope radiating from every trapped mind as they realized liberation was possible. Elena had learned everything she needed from 8 months of isolation, from witnessing Mitchell's horrors, from the wolves' desperate trust. Now came the ultimate test: save thousands of consciousness without sacrificing her daughter's humanity, or watch them all die as Mitchell's final protocol activated worldwide. Elena made her choice and opened herself completely to the network's full power. The quantum network exploded through Elena's consciousness like a supernova, thousands of minds suddenly accessible as her awareness expanded beyond the confines of individual thought. She felt her sense of self stretching across continents, touching every transferred consciousness in Mitchell's global network, and for one terrifying moment she understood what it meant to be everyone and no one simultaneously. Elena, Webb's desperate projection cut through the chaos. You're fragmenting. But Elena pushed deeper into the collective, her enhanced neural pathways serving as conduits for power her daughter was unconsciously channeling. Through the network, she perceived Mitchell's final protocol activating worldwide mass consciousness transfers designed to create an army of enslaved minds trapped in animal bodies, forever dependent on his research facilities. In Milwaukee, she felt 37 civilians being strapped into transfer machines. In Prague, children as young as 5 were being prepped for consciousness extraction. The scope of Mitchell's operation was beyond anything she'd imagined, a systematic effort to harvest human awareness itself. Chen, he's not just running experiments, Elena gasped. Her voice distorted as multiple consciousness patterns spoke through her simultaneously. He's preparing to transfer world leaders, military commanders, anyone with strategic value. Replace them with controlled consciousness while their real minds are trapped in animal bodies. The tunnel erupted in gunfire as Mitchell's forces reached their position. Webb's pack moved with impossible coordination, each wolf responding to threats perceived through their quantum-linked awareness. But Elena could sense the soldiers' growing terror as they realized they were fighting an enemy that shared thoughts faster than bullets could fly. Through the network, Elena felt Mitchell himself approaching, his consciousness pattern blazing with cold determination as he descended into the tunnel system. But something was wrong with his neural signature. The quantum resonance was too strong, too coordinated. He's already transferred, Elena realized with horror. Mitchell put his own consciousness into an enhanced body. The understanding crashed through the network like a shockwave. Mitchell had used his own research to upgrade himself, transferring his consciousness into a physically enhanced form while maintaining full human cognitive abilities. He wasn't just experimenting on others, he was creating a new species with himself as the prototype. Elena's daughter's cries intensified, the baby's distress sending quantum fluctuations through the network that every linked mind felt like physical pain. Through her enhanced connection, Elena suddenly perceived what her daughter was experiencing, the collective anguish of thousands of trapped consciousness, all crying out for help simultaneously. She's trying to stabilize them all at once, Elena realized. The quantum bridges are overloading her developing neural pathways. Chen's scanner readings spiked into dangerous territory as the baby's consciousness manipulation abilities reached critical levels. Elena, your daughter's neural patterns are approaching collapse. If she doesn't stop channeling network power, I know. Elena fought to maintain individual awareness as thousands of minds pressed against her consciousness. Through the network, she could feel every transferred subject worldwide, their desperation, their fading hope, their growing realization that death might be preferable to eternal imprisonment in alien bodies. But she could also feel their trust in her. Webb's pack had shared their story across the quantum network, spreading word of the pregnant woman who had chosen to help rather than hide. Across the globe, transferred consciousness were rallying to her call for liberation, coordinating escape attempts with supernatural precision. The tunnel shook as a new presence entered Elena's awareness, massive, cold, and absolutely certain of its own superiority. Mitchell's enhanced consciousness pressed against the network like ice against fire, his thoughts carrying the weight of absolute control. Dr. Vasquez. Mitchell's mental voice cut through the quantum chaos with surgical precision. Your daughter's abilities exceed even my most optimistic projections. Surrender now, and I'll ensure her development proceeds under proper scientific supervision. Elena felt Webb's pack tense as Mitchell's forces surrounded their position. Through the network, she perceived dozens of soldiers moving with enhanced coordination, more transferred consciousness, but these retained human bodies while gaining networked intelligence. You created your own army, Elena projected back, her thoughts sharp with disgust. Soldiers who share tactical awareness while keeping their original forms. The next evolution of human consciousness, Mitchell replied. Individual awareness enhanced by collective intelligence. Your daughter could lead that evolution, or she can die with the rest of you. Elena's enhanced sensitivity suddenly flared as she perceived Mitchell's true plan. The mass transfers weren't just about creating slaves, they were about testing consciousness manipulation technology on a global scale. Her daughter's abilities were the missing piece, the key to controlling transferred minds with precision that made traditional authority obsolete. Through the quantum network, Elena felt thousands of trapped consciousness waiting for her decision. She could use her daughter's power to free them all, but doing so would prove to Mitchell exactly what her child was capable of, ensuring she'd be hunted forever. Elena looked at her newborn daughter, felt the baby's incredible potential burning like a star through the quantum network, and made her choice. She was going to burn Mitchell's entire operation to the ground. Elena's consciousness exploded outward through the quantum network like a dying star, her awareness touching every trapped mind across Mitchell's global operation. But this time, she didn't try to stabilize or heal. She let her rage burn through the quantum bridges with the fury of a mother protecting her child. If you want to see what my daughter can do, Elena projected across the network, her thoughts carrying the weight of 8 months' accumulated grief and fury. Then watch me tear your empire apart. She felt Webb's pack recoil as her consciousness became a weapon, channeling her daughter's unconscious power through neural pathways that had been sensitized by months of isolation and trauma. Elena had learned to perceive consciousness itself. Now she was going to shatter every quantum bridge Mitchell had built. The first facility in Milwaukee screamed as Elena's awareness crashed through its transfer network, overloading the quantum processors with feedback loops that fried every piece of consciousness manipulation equipment in the building. 37 civilians who had been strapped to transfer machines suddenly found their restraints releasing as emergency protocols activated. In Prague, Elena's rage manifested as pure quantum chaos, fragmenting the facility's network connection and leaving transferred consciousness free from Mitchell's control grid. Children scheduled for extraction were forgotten as researchers fled buildings where every piece of electronic equipment was simultaneously failing. "Elena, stop!" Chen shouted over her daughter's piercing cries. "You're burning out your own neural pathways." But Elena pushed deeper into the network, accepting the cost. Each facility she destroyed was costing her pieces of her individual identity, her consciousness fragmenting as she channeled power her human mind was never designed to handle. She could feel herself dissolving into the quantum network, one thought at a time. Through the collapsing bridges, she felt Mitchell's fury as his global operation crumbled. "You're destroying everything. Those transferred minds need the network to survive. Then they'll die free," Elena projected back, her mental voice growing weaker as her individual awareness scattered across continents. She felt consciousness patterns fragmenting worldwide, some trapped minds choosing death over slavery as their quantum bridges collapsed. The cost of her choice hit her like a physical blow. Hundreds of transferred consciousness were dying as she severed their network connections, their minds too damaged by Mitchell's procedures to survive without artificial support. Elena was saving thousands, but only by sacrificing hundreds of others. Webb's pack fought desperately around her as Mitchell's enhanced soldiers closed in, but Elena barely noticed. Her awareness was spreading too thin, touching too many minds across too great a distance. She could feel her memory patterns beginning to degrade, 8 months of pregnancy and loss becoming abstract concepts rather than lived experience. Her daughter's cries suddenly intensified, and Elena felt the baby's consciousness reaching out, not to the global network, but to her. Through quantum bridges too delicate for adult minds to perceive, her newborn child was trying to hold Elena's fragmenting awareness together. "No," Elena thought desperately. "I won't let you carry this burden." But it was too late. Her daughter's natural abilities were already stabilizing Elena's consciousness, the baby's unconscious power preventing complete neural collapse. Elena felt herself being pulled back from the edge of dissolution. But the cost was her daughter becoming exactly what Mitchell wanted, a consciousness manipulation weapon powerful enough to hold the global network together. Through the quantum connection, Elena suddenly understood the full scope of her sacrifice. By destroying Mitchell's operation, she had forced her daughter to reveal the true extent of her abilities. The baby was no longer just gifted. She was now the most powerful consciousness manipulator in human history. Her neural patterns permanently altered by the effort to save her mother's mind. "Chen!" Elena gasped, her voice barely recognizable as her consciousness settled back into individual awareness. "Take her! Run! I've made her too valuable to hide." Around them, the tunnel filled with the sounds of Webb's pack being overwhelmed. Elena's network assault had succeeded. Facilities worldwide were offline. Thousands of trapped consciousness were free. Mitchell's global operation was in ruins, but the victory had come at the ultimate cost. Her daughter would never have a normal life. The baby's unconscious use of consciousness manipulation power had marked her as the most dangerous and valuable person on Earth. Mitchell might be finished, but others would come. Governments, corporations, researchers, all hunting for the child who could rewrite human consciousness itself. Elena looked at her newborn daughter, now quiet in Chen's arms, and felt the weight of her choice settling like lead in her chest. She had saved thousands of trapped minds and destroyed a global conspiracy, but she had sacrificed her child's humanity in the process. The baby's eyes met hers through the quantum network, and Elena felt a moment of perfect understanding pass between them. Her daughter already knew what she was, what she would become, what Elena's choice had cost them both. In the distance, Elena heard Mitchell's enhanced voice calling for surrender. The immediate battle was lost, but the war had just begun. The gunfire stopped abruptly, leaving only the drip of melting snow and Elena's ragged breathing echoing through the tunnel. Chen clutched the baby against her chest, both of them backing deeper into the shadows as Mitchell's enhanced voice grew closer. "Dr. Vasquez, there's nowhere left to run. My global network may be damaged, but I still have enough transferred consciousness under my control to hunt you across every continent." His words carried the cold certainty of someone who had calculated every possible outcome. "Your daughter's demonstration was illuminating. She's even more valuable than I anticipated." Elena struggled to her feet, her body trembling from the neural feedback of channeling power far beyond human limits. The quantum network still hummed faintly in her awareness, but it felt different now, fragmented, chaotic, like a symphony played by a broken orchestra. Through the damaged connections, she could sense the aftermath of her assault rippling worldwide. In Milwaukee, freed civilians were stumbling out of the destroyed facility, their minds intact but traumatized by their near-transfer experience. In Prague, children were being reunited with families who had thought them lost forever. Across dozens of installations, transferred consciousness were experiencing their first moments of true freedom in months or years of captivity, but the liberation had come at a devastating price. Elena felt the absence of hundreds of minds that hadn't survived her network attack, consciousness too damaged by Mitchell's procedures to exist without artificial support. Their final moments haunted the quantum bridges like ghosts, accusation and gratitude mingled in equal measure. You feel them, don't you? Mitchell emerged from the tunnel's darkness, his enhanced form moving with predatory grace. Elena could see now what the transfer process had done to him. His body was still recognizably human, but something fundamental had changed. His eyes held the cold precision of a machine coupled with the cruel intelligence that had driven his research. Every mind that died when you severed their connections, was their freedom worth their lives? Elena met his gaze, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. You're the one who made them choose between slavery and death. I just gave them the choice. Webb's pack emerged from their defensive positions, but Elena could see they were badly outnumbered. Mitchell's enhanced soldiers had taken strategic positions throughout the tunnel system, their networked awareness making conventional tactics useless. Through her damaged connection to the quantum network, Elena felt the soldiers' synchronized thoughts, cold, efficient, utterly loyal to Mitchell's vision of human evolution. Chen's scanner beeped softly, and she glanced at the readings with growing alarm. Elena, your daughter's neural patterns are still fluctuating. The power she channeled to save your consciousness, it's changed her brain structure permanently. The quantum manipulation centers are developing at an accelerated rate. Elena looked at her daughter, so small and fragile in Chen's arms, and felt her heart break anew. The baby's eyes tracked movements with uncanny awareness, as if she could see the quantum bridges connecting every consciousness around her. During Elena's network assault, her daughter had instinctively reached out to hold her mother's fragmenting mind together, but that single act had revealed capabilities that transcended anything Mitchell had achieved through decades of research. She's not just manipulating consciousness, Elena realized, her voice barely a whisper. She's rewriting the fundamental structure of awareness itself, making quantum bridges stronger, more stable, more permanent than anything we thought possible. Mitchell's enhanced hearing caught her words, and his expression shifted from predatory satisfaction to something approaching awe. Show me. No. Elena stepped protectively in front of Chen and the baby, though she knew her exhausted body could offer little physical resistance. She's not a weapon for you to study. She's the next stage of human evolution, Mitchell replied, his voice carrying absolute conviction. Individual consciousness was always a temporary phase, an evolutionary dead end. Your daughter represents true transcendence, awareness that exists beyond the limitations of individual biology, that can reshape consciousness itself according to rational design rather than random mutation. Through the damaged quantum network, Elena felt the reactions of transferred consciousness worldwide. Some were terrified by the implications of her daughter's power, the possibility that free will itself might be subject to manipulation by a sufficiently advanced consciousness. Others saw hope in the baby's abilities, the potential for healing minds that had been shattered by Mitchell's experiments. But Elena felt something else through the network connection, recognition. The transferred consciousness weren't just reacting to her daughter's power, they were communicating with her. Even as a newborn, the baby was somehow aware of every mind touched by the quantum bridges, responding to their thoughts and emotions with an empathy that transcended species boundaries. Webb stepped forward, his massive form placing himself between Mitchell and Elena's family. Through their pack bond, Elena felt his determination and his acceptance of the sacrifice he was about to make. "Run," Webb projected, his thoughts carrying the weight of absolute finality. "My pack will buy you time, but not much." Elena looked at the wolves who had saved her life, at Chen, who had risked everything to help deliver her daughter, at Mitchell, whose vision of human transcendence had become humanity's greatest nightmare. The immediate battle was ending, but she understood now that the real conflict was just beginning. Her daughter would grow up in a world where consciousness itself had become a battlefield, where the definition of humanity was being rewritten by those with the power to manipulate awareness at its most fundamental level. The war for the future of human consciousness was about to begin. The return. Elena cradled her daughter against her chest as they emerged from the tunnel system into the harsh dawn light, Webb's surviving pack members flanking them like shadows against the snow. The battle in the depths had ended not with victory or defeat, but with something far more complex, a fragile truce born of mutual exhaustion and the terrible understanding that her daughter's power changed everything. Mitchell was gone. His enhanced consciousness scattered across the quantum network when the final facility overloads had cascaded through his neural implants. His enhanced soldiers had simply stopped, their networked awareness dissolving without his guiding intelligence. In the sudden silence, Elena had felt hundreds of transferred consciousness across the globe experiencing true autonomy for the first time in years. But freedom, she was learning, carried its own weight. The safe house Chen had arranged sat nestled in a valley 40 miles from the facility, smoke rising from its chimney like a promise of warmth. As they approached, Elena felt her daughter's consciousness reaching out through quantum bridges too delicate for adult minds to perceive, touching the awareness of every living thing in the surrounding forest. Trees, animals, even the bacteria in the soil, all connected in a web of empathy that left Elena breathless with its scope. "She's not just reading consciousness," Elena murmured, her voice filled with wonder and terror in equal measure. "She's teaching them to communicate." A murder of crows erupted from the trees as they passed, their cries forming patterns that sounded almost like language. Webb's ears flicked forward, and through their pack bond, Elena felt his recognition. The birds were trying to say welcome home. Inside the cabin, Elena finally allowed herself to collapse into a chair by the fire, her body trembling with the aftershocks of channeling power far beyond human limits. Her neural pathways still hummed with residual quantum energy, fragments of other minds' memories surfacing in her thoughts like debris from a shipwreck. She remembered being a child in Prague, though she'd never left Colorado. She recalled the taste of raw rabbit, though she'd been vegetarian for years. "The network connections are permanent, aren't they?" she asked Chen, who was setting up monitoring equipment with practiced efficiency. "I'm still linked to every consciousness I touched during the assault." Chen nodded grimly, checking her scanner readings. "Your brain structure has been fundamentally altered. The quantum manipulation centers that developed during your pregnancy have expanded exponentially. Elena, you're no longer entirely human, at least not in any way we previously understood the term." The words should have terrified her. Instead, Elena felt a strange sense of completeness, as if she had been living her entire life with only half her senses functional. Through the quantum network, she could feel transferred consciousness adapting to their freedom worldwide, some choosing to remain in their animal forms, others desperately seeking ways back to human bodies that might no longer exist. Her daughter stirred in her arms, and Elena felt the baby's consciousness brushing against her thoughts with gossamer gentleness. The contact carried no words, but Elena understood anyway. "I see you, Mother, all of you. Every mind you carry, every memory you hold, you are not alone." Webb approached the fire, his massive form settling beside Elena's chair with careful grace. Through their connection, she felt his profound gratitude and his sorrow. The battle had cost him 2 pack members, their consciousness truly gone rather than transferred. Death, Elena realized, had become something different in a world where awareness itself could be moved between bodies. "What happens now?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew. Her daughter's abilities would attract attention from every government, corporation, and research institution on the planet. The child who could rewrite consciousness itself would never be allowed to live a normal life. Chen pulled up news feeds on her portable terminal, and Elena felt her heart sink as she read the headlines. Military officials were already spinning the facility destructions as terrorist attacks. Missing persons reports were flooding in as transferred consciousness chose to disappear rather than return to lives that no longer fit. The world was awakening to the reality that human consciousness was no longer the fixed, individual phenomenon everyone had believed it to be. "There are others," Chen said quietly, scrolling through encrypted communications. "Scientists, philosophers, ethicists, people who have been studying consciousness enhancement for years. Some want to help your daughter learn control. Others—" She paused, her expression darkening. "Others see her as either salvation or apocalypse, with no middle ground." Elena looked down at her sleeping child, so peaceful despite carrying the power to reshape the nature of awareness itself. Through the quantum network, she could feel the baby's unconscious influence spreading like ripples on a pond, teaching transferred consciousness how to heal their traumatic memories, showing animal minds new depths of empathy, creating connections that transcended every boundary science had once considered absolute. Her daughter was not just changing the world, she was changing what it meant to have a mind at all. "Then we disappear," Elena said finally, a decision crystallizing with the weight of absolute certainty. "All of us. We find somewhere safe, and we teach her to control this power before anyone else tries to use her." Webb's approval rumbled through their bond, and Elena felt similar agreement from distant consciousness, still touched by the network's far-reaching connections. Her strange family, enhanced human, hybrid wolves, and a child who existed beyond all previous categories of consciousness would forge their own path forward. The world Elena returned to was not the one she had left. Neither was she. The new beginning. 3 months later, Elena watched her daughter's first conscious manipulation of quantum consciousness, while morning sunlight streamed through the windows of their hidden sanctuary deep in the Canadian wilderness. The baby, they had finally named her Maya, meaning illusion, for her ability to blur the boundaries between minds, lay in her handcrafted cradle, eyes focused on something beyond the visible spectrum. A family of sparrows had nested outside the window, and through her enhanced perception, Elena could feel Maya gently touching their simple awareness with gossamer threads of consciousness. The birds weren't becoming human, but something new entirely. Their natural instincts expanded to include concepts of empathy and abstract thought that had never existed in avian minds before. "She's teaching them to dream," Elena whispered to Webb, who lay stretched across the cabin floor like a living rug. Through their permanent bond, she felt his amused recognition. The pack had been experiencing increasingly vivid dreams since Maya's birth, nocturnal journeys through landscapes of pure consciousness that left them more thoughtful and introspective than any wolves in history. Chen emerged from the kitchen, tablet in hand, her expression carefully neutral. "The morning intelligence reports," she announced, setting down fresh coffee beside Elena. "The world is still adapting to what happened." Elena skimmed the encrypted files while Maya gurgled contentedly nearby. Governments had classified the facility incidents, but rumors persisted. Underground networks had formed among freed consciousness who chose to remain in animal bodies, creating communities that operated by rules no human society had ever imagined. Several nations had quietly begun their own consciousness transfer research, despite public denials. "Any word from the others?" Elena asked, referring to the small network of researchers, ethicists, and former test subjects who had chosen to disappear alongside them. "Dr. Rodriguez finished her analysis of Maya's neural patterns," Chen replied. The quantum manipulation centers are still developing, but they're stabilizing into something she calls controlled transcendence. Your daughter isn't just powerful, Elena. She's learning to be precise. Through the cabin's reinforced walls, Elena could sense the presence of their extended community scattered throughout the valley. Former military consciousness who had found peace in the bodies of deer and elk. Scientists whose research had been corrupted by Mitchell's vision, now dedicating themselves to ethical consciousness studies. Children like Maya, born to enhanced parents, each carrying unique gifts that would reshape humanity's understanding of its own nature. They had named their sanctuary Haven, though it appeared on no maps and could only be found by those whose consciousness had been touched by the quantum network. It was both a refuge and a school, a place where the next stage of human evolution could develop without exploitation or fear. Maya's attention shifted from the sparrows to Elena herself, and she felt her daughter's consciousness brush against the inherited memories still lodged in her neural pathways. The baby seemed particularly fascinated by Elena's recollections of her life before, the veterinary practice, the research facility, the night she had first encountered Webb's pack in the blizzard that had changed everything. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never opened that door," Elena murmured, stroking Maya's downy hair. "If I'd stayed hidden in my cabin until the storm passed." Webb's response rippled through their bond. "You would still be alone. We would still be trapped. She would never have been born to heal what was broken." Elena smiled, feeling the truth of it resonate through every quantum bridge in her expanded consciousness. The scared, isolated woman who had fled to the mountains 8 months pregnant was gone, replaced by someone who existed partially in the spaces between minds, who carried fragments of hundreds of other awareness, who had learned that consciousness itself was far more fluid and interconnected than anyone had imagined. Maya began to cry, not from distress, but from the overwhelming joy of a mind that perceived love and connection in spectrums no adult consciousness could fully comprehend. Through the quantum network, Elena felt responsive emotions from every enhanced being within a 100-mile radius, all of them touched by her daughter's pure expression of happiness. "Chen," Elena said suddenly, her decision crystallizing with familiar certainty, "send word to the others. It's time." Time for what? Elena stood, lifting Maya from her cradle, and walked to the window overlooking their hidden valley. Below, she could see members of their community going about their daily lives, some in human form, others having chosen bodies that better suited their transformed consciousness. Children played games that involved sharing dreams and memories. Adults collaborated on problems by temporarily merging their awareness. It was a glimpse of what humanity might become if it chose connection over isolation, empathy over exploitation, transcendence over dominance. "Time to stop hiding," Elena replied, feeling Maya's consciousness pulse with agreement through their bond. "Time to show the world that consciousness enhancement doesn't have to mean losing our humanity. It can mean finally becoming everything we were meant to be." Webb rose to his feet, his massive form radiating protective determination. Through the quantum network, Elena felt similar resolve from consciousness across the globe who had been waiting for this moment. The world beyond Haven was still dangerous, still hungry for power over consciousness itself. But Elena was no longer the frightened woman who had fled into the mountains. She was something new, human, and more than human, individual and collective, a bridge between what humanity had been and what it might yet become. With her daughter in her arms and her impossible family beside her, Elena stepped toward the door that would lead them back into a world that had no idea how much it was about to change. The new beginning started with a single step forward, into the light.